There's Playwrights Chat Room number 2. We're going to be talking with Oren Safdie about his play Imminent Domain. And this is just a bit of a soft start here. As we discovered last week, it takes a little while for everybody to start clicking in on Zoom and on Facebook. So I'm just sitting here and I'm vamping and waiting for a signal from our technician that the Facebook is up. We are covering the continent here today, I know, because I know we have people watching us in New Brunswick, and of course Oren and Paul are both in California. I had one question which I will try and answer while I'm vamping here. Somebody asked me, what's that candle in the corner of the screen from last week? And this is just happens to be, it's not quite it's a ritual, maybe a superstition at Infinite Theater. When we do readings or have discussions, I light a candle. It's in honor of Anton Chekhov and the flag that he used to raise when he was writing in his guest cabin. Instead of to keep the peasants away who wanted him as a doctor, he would raise the flag to show that he was writing. So the muse is with us, and the muse is with you, Oren. And I am hearing click here. All right. I don't know. Or Morgany, can you tell me, are we on Facebook? Are we ready to go?
Not on Facebook yet. Still trying to get it up and running.
Okay. Sorry about this, folks. The magic of technology. So yes, we, Oren, are looking at you, and you are, I believe, in Venice Beach, Los Angeles, which happens to also be the setting of the play. So this play is very much close to home, I gather.
To home and in my home, and it's one of those plays that fell into my lap. Literally, yeah.
All right, I think I'm just going to start now, even though Facebook has not clicked in. Sorry about that, Morgandy. But so here we go, ladies and gentlemen, and all of us folks. Welcome to Infinite Theater Playwrights Chat Room number 2. We are here with Oren Safdie, who's actually in California, and we are going to be talking with him about the first draft of his new play, Imminent Domain. Of course, Oren is no stranger to Infinite Theater audiences. Oren, I'll get back to you in a second. I just want to quickly introduce the other members of our chat room. We have Don Jordan in green, surrounded by green. Thank you, Don, for coming for us. Don, of course, Montreal actor, longtime president of ACTRA, artistic director of Black Theatre Workshop, and with so many awards that if I enumerated them all, we would actually run out of time in an hour. So thank you very much, Don, for joining us. Elaine Greenberg. Elaine, welcome. Elaine, we don't actually know each other. You are a fan of Infinite Theater work. You wrote in some comments that interested both Oren and I. And so we've invited you into the chat room on the basis of your comments. You are, of course, also a playwright as well. And you are a training specialist in robotics at the International Space Center in Saint-Hubert. That's absolutely amazing, but that's probably another chat room at some other point. So anyway, thank you very much for joining us. Vishesh Abratni. Vishesh, of course, a playwright, also a technical writer. Vishesh, you actually picked up one of the prizes in our last Right on Cue. So thank you very much for joining us on this. We look forward to the wisdom from the Ottawa Valley. And Michaela Di Cesare. Michaela, of course, Montreal actress, playwright, and also has been a member of Infinite's Playwrights unit. So welcome, Michaela. You all actually know Oren's work from the inside because you acted in one of his plays that he staged here, Gratitude, that he staged here, I guess, a year and a half ago. So you can talk as a playwright and as an actor inside and outside, upside and downside. And then Paul Van Dyck, who is also in California. Paul, we roasted you a week ago, so we allowed you to sit in on this to get your own back. So Paul, thank you very much for joining us on this. So here we are. I'm going to try and keep it moving as much as I can. But let's start off, first of all, Oren, conscious of the fact that there are many out there watching who do not know the play. Again, it's a first draft of a new play, and I just repeat, of course, that we have worked together. You've worked with Infinite Theatre a number of times, and again, this past Right on Cue, you also won an award, and actually Dawn was one of the readers when we read Colorblind in December. So I won't go on about all of your wonderful, your history with writing and playwright, but you do write also for TV and film as well as for theater. Oren, just give us a little bit of background to the play, why you wrote it, what it is about, maybe a short synopsis.
Well, I moved into Venice about 8 years ago. It was right when the housing market crashed. And it was still sort of a sketchy neighborhood, but famous internet companies like Google and Snapchat, actually, their head office was here, kind of rose the image of Venice, and people started moving in, and it became more of a, I guess, it always had a mix. That's the one thing. Venice was always a mix. You could have a $2 million, $3 million house next to a little bungalow that was rent controlled next to public housing. But one thing I'm sure some of you have seen is that Los Angeles has just kind of exploded with the homelessness situation. And the two main places are Skid Row, downtown LA, which if you go for 3-4 blocks, you would think you were in India, really, because it's just person on top of person, tents everywhere, and people living with just horrible means. I mean, there's no bathrooms, and I drove down there. And then the other place is here in Venice, which is not maybe as in your face, but it's been creeping, and there's been a lot of tension between people in Venice who are quite liberal and are very progressive, and yet, you know, there's places here in Venice where you can't walk down the street. And then on top of that, there's all these RVs and cars that are parking on the street, people sleeping in their RVs and in their cars. So this play came about where this giant RV parked maybe 10 feet from our window. And this was not the first time it's happened. It comes every so often. And we even could hear the people coughing and breathing at night, because sometimes you leave your windows open. So I tried to make it a little unpleasant for the people to leave. And let's say I'd go out in the morning. I'm not proud of this. That's why I kind of wrote the play. But I would make a lot of noise, and I would sort of, and I would do things when I went running. And I got a note from a man, and it was on my door that said, if you really want me to leave, we'll leave. And I found out it was an elderly Black man and his wife. And he wrote, there's a speech in my play that pretty much sums up what he told me, which was, you know, you think just because you bought this place that you deserve this place. And it made me feel really guilty. And I knocked on his door and I invited him to say, I said, don't go anywhere. And I felt really bad. And that was sort of the impetus for the play.
Wow.
That's the first half. The second half is I have a neighbor 2 doors down who invited his friend to stay for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks on his couch in an illegally sublet, kind of like he's converted his garage into an extra bedroom. It's 4 years later now, and he can't get his friend out, and his friend's not paying rent, and he blackmails him to say, if you ever kick me out, I'm going to tell the housing authorities and you that you're not have up to building code, and you'll have to put $50,000 into it to stay. So these two stories kind of came together, and that's sort of the formation of where this play came from.
That's absolutely incredible. Just a reminder here for if you've just joined us, we're talking to Oren Safdie. We're talking about the first draft of a new play of his. It's called Imminent Domain, and we're here in the Infinite Theatre chat room. And I'm just going to quickly now go through here. So Dawn, do you want to start? Just a quick reaction to when you read the play, what you thought, what you felt, how, your reaction to it.
Okay. Well, I just had the opportunity to read it just a short while ago, and right from the very beginning, I was trying to figure out where you were going with it, and then it didn't take long, and all of a sudden, I found myself laughing out loud. I thought that there were so many interesting and comical situations that were happening that were so true and real that it really just tickled my funny bone. And I really want to congratulate you, Oren, on a really, really nice piece. And I was very, very pleased to have the opportunity to read it.
Did you anticipate the ending?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, the ending I think I was a little torn with the ending, to be honestly truthful. And
let's go back to that, because I think there may be others that may share that question. I'm just going to quickly keep going. Elaine, go for it. What was your reaction when you read the play?
Well, I also really enjoyed reading the play. I thought it was also very funny. I thought it was very topical and very interesting. I really liked the premise. As I was reading it, I formulated a lot of questions which I didn't really feel got answered. So I'm hoping at some point during this chat room, we'll be able to discuss those. But I feel the same way that Dawn did about the ending. I'm not quite sure I was totally comfortable with it.
Okay, interesting. All right. So we'll get back to your questions. So line those up. We'll get back to you very quickly. Pishish.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Both times I read it, I just kind of zipped through it. It was funny, unpredictable, compelling, disturbing, and a very kind of intriguing examination of how, like, underneath all of our attempts at civilization, the fight for territory, the fight for land, the fight for a home carries with it the danger of pulling us all back to being these sort of scared, nervous, aggressive animals. So it was very, very, very interesting.
Okay, just a reminder, we're doing this for Oren now. We better not be too laudatory here. We're trying to give him a few little hurdles and drive him to write the next draft. So I mean, obviously, we can't hold back on some nice things, but we should be a little bit more careful. Okay, Michaela.
Well, now that's great. You set me up to be the teacher. I was going to say, first of all, Vishesh.
Nobody has ever stopped you, Michaela. I don't believe that. Nobody's ever stopped you doing anything. Michaela, you're one of the great writers to work with because you listen to everybody's viewpoint on your own work in the room, and then you do what you do anyway. I mean, it's not that you haven't listened. It's that you listen and learn, but you actually then make sure you write it the way you want to write it anyway. So I don't think anybody stopped you doing anything. Sorry.
Very stubborn. I was going to congratulate Vishesh on reading the play twice. I feel like now he won the chat room. That's a very good prep. I read it a few days ago, so bear with me. I was actually happy about the wink to gratitude with Cafe Gratitude, I have to say. That made me giggle. I performed in Oren's play Gratitude. So just picking up on some of the things that were already said, I totally agree that there are some comical situations that are born out of awkwardness but relatable and timely content, as Elaine said. And I guess for me, I felt like a lot of that came and went quickly. And I mean, maybe it's a good sign, but there were definitely places where I felt we could sit in it longer, and that just having these characters, especially when the four of them are existing in the same space, I wanted more of that. I wanted more time for that to simmer. So overall, I just had like a pacing question based on one read that it went by really quickly, and I wonder where the places are that we could extend our pleasure for a little bit. I'm also fascinated by Carrie, so I had tons of questions about her, and then maybe that could come around. I guess it feeds into the ending a little bit too, because I had an 8-month pregnant person in my play Successions, and when I saw, and so when Carrie enters the scene, I thought, okay, if someone's pregnant, there's probably going to be labor, which I avoided, but it's kind of like having the loaded gun or whatever in the first act. It's like, this has to pop. So I was expecting it, but then that's not what I expected at all. And I'd be really curious to hear the discussions about.
I'm going to come back to you on Carrie, because we've had a lot of comments written in and questions about exactly who she is, what she does, and why she is the way she is. In case anybody's just joined us, we're talking with playwright Oren Safdie about the first draft of his play, Imminent Domain. So I think I'm moving over. Paul, you're, I think, the last in the initial comments here. Give us some reaction to reading the play.
I very much enjoyed it, like everyone else. It was a real page turner. For better or for worse, I've been reading a lot of Dostoevsky recently, and I felt the theme of
you just in the chat room there. Is that, can we agree on that? Kayla, you mentioned Dostoevsky, you in the chat room. Yeah.
But that theme of we can all have a boundless love of humanity as long as we don't have to live next to anyone is right in there, in that socket of, yeah, I love people as long as I don't have to have a neighbor. But yeah, I found the tone really interesting. I wondered, is it a comedy or not? I mean, I know the situations could be funny, and I did find them funny, but depending on how this is directed or performed, it could be just some simmering thriller throughout the entire thing. And with that ending, I guess it made me rethink everything that I did think was funny to begin. And that was a sort of larger question I had for you about the tone. How did you see it? You know, a Neil Simon Barefoot in the Park or Quentin Tarantino?
Okay, let's just hold that question, Oren, before you answer it. I'm just going to jump in here with my reactions. It is, as always, Oren, you write good plays. And they're always so different, which is what I find fascinating as, you know, as someone who reads a lot of plays. It's very hard to recognize that in fact this is an Oren Safdie play just from how you've written it. I'll be honest, when I started reading, I said, oh my God, he's written a goddamn soap opera here. And I was at times at the beginning just a little bit you know, disappointed. I thought, this is moving a bit slowly for me, and these characters, I'm not sure I really like them. But the way you structured it, it's a little bit like a thumb screw. So on the first few screws, you know, it's sort of, you don't even notice it, and it itches, and then the screw keeps turning, and then it gets a little, hey, what's that on my thumb? And then slowly, and on the end, you're really towards it. So, so yes, in the end, you grabbed me. But I'm going back to Paul's question now, which I think is really is one of the central ones. What tone? How do you see this being played, or do you? You've just written it. Have you already got, you know, actors in mind in a sense? Because a lot of comments are that we don't like the characters necessarily. And do we need to like them? I mean, your central character, Sid, I'm not sure, can he write? Is he a good writer? Is it important that he's a good writer? He's just almost sold a pilot to a TV series. Is he a good writer? Does it matter? Are we supposed to like these characters?
I don't know. I don't really judge them. I just write them the way I see them, and hopefully let others judge that. I think in terms of a larger question is, I don't answer a lot of questions in this play, and that's a big question I have to everybody. I mean, I should just go back and say that when Guy told me about this happening, I was finished the first act, and I knew where I wanted to sort of go the second act. So the second act was really rushed because I wanted to get a full play to you so that people would know where I wanted to go with it. But I do agree with Michaela that it, you know, I haven't flushed it out in the second act, especially as much as I'd like to. It gets there very quickly, and I'd like to spend a little bit more time. But a question I have is, like, I don't answer some questions, and I don't know if that bothers you. Like, for instance, things that I've been grappling since I even handed this draft in and I continue to work on is, for instance, Carrie gets her the medication and she assumes that she's a drug addict. Now, I have mixed feelings about that, because a lot of the people who are living on the street here have some kind of sketchy history, even though they might not come up front with it. But what I've been working on is that she might accuse her of that, but maybe she answers that it's for her back pain. And we don't know if they're scamming them or not. And we don't know those things for sure. And I want to kind of leave that as if the audience is the people living in the house. So we'll never know those answers. I don't know if you need those answers. Do you need the answer that he's a good writer, bad writer, or whatever? I don't know.
Well, to me, it's going to affect how I see him. If he's just written, Dyck, then I'm not really that interested in his fate. But if he is genuinely trying to write something, that has some, what is it that Amos says? You make it. How does that make the world better or something? I think you do find a different way to hook into your character.
Yeah, and I have to also say that I did sort of very quickly plug in a sitcom that doesn't really correlate very much with this story, and my mother actually pointed this out to me. That said, it was a real good opportunity to have, because she's the first person I always let read my plays. She's the most critical,
Very cool.
So I wanted to find something, and I think I found something that is more that we see what he's working out in his television pilot that has to do more with his own struggle in his own life.
Okay. Does that make sense to anybody? Because I think there were a couple of questions about exactly that. How does the pilot relate to the play itself?
Yeah.
I had some thoughts on that. That was one of my favorite parts of the script, is that mirroring of the TV script with Sid's personal life and his newfound empathy, trying to infuse that into his script. But I kind of wanted a bit more out of that mirroring. I thought the fact that it was rejected by, I guess Charles is the one that hates the changes, is I wanted to know a little bit more about what Charles hated, because right now it's set up that, well, TV scripts are superficial. This is what sort of Sid gives us. So for him trying to make it more profound and sincere, it's probably that's what Charles hates about it. But I wonder if perhaps the rejection of the script is the same reason why the empathy in Sid's real life is rejected. It's because it's insincere, and it's just something he's forced into his life out of his own, to appease his guilt. So perhaps it's not that the changes in the script are bad because they don't fit for TV. They're bad because they're insincere, and Sid just might be a bad writer, So. And that doesn't turn me away from Sid just because if he happens to be a bad writer. So I'd still be interested in him, even though he may not be very good at what he does.
So I had hooked in Oren that the pilot is, as he describes it, it's about this white sort of Boston enclave that of not so nice people that occasionally do nice things, once or twice do nice things. And I thought that's what you were trying to mirror here with Sid and his actions. But I agree with Paulie. You might be able to hook them in a little bit more integrally into the whole thing.
Yeah, I sort of, that was actually a pilot that I had worked on a long time ago. Somebody came from a play. The one I'm working with right now is that he has sort of 3 friends out of college who are very privileged, who are just living with no motivation and not doing anything, sort of slackers. It's very much like 3 guys who are slackers, who don't want to commit to anything, don't want to date. And the changes that he does are so that instead of them being slackers who are privileged with their parents paying for them and everything, that the pilot changes from them suddenly with the parents cutting them off and they have to go out into the real world by themselves. And the idea being sort of that he's at a point where he's about to assume responsibility, you know, in a real way. He's been borrowing money, now he has a child, and it's a step for him. So I don't know if that parallels too much. You know, I'm just still really working on those things.
Yeah, okay. But it's that was a question, how the pilot and the play itself, you know, can feed each other a little bit more. So I'm just going to go around again to everybody. Elaine, let's start with you. Your questions that you had some good, I think, motivational issues, maybe.
Well, that's it. I mean, for me, I was trying to get a better understanding of Amos and Gladys and why they were doing what they were doing, what their motivation was, what they've been doing for the last 7 years living in their camper, what went wrong with their relationship with their children, that kind of thing that you mentioned earlier. Do I really need to answer those questions? And for me, I kind of felt like you did, because I didn't feel satisfied at the end. I felt like those questions were still with me. And I wasn't entirely sure if, you know, Amos's great-grandfather really did live in that house, or if this was really a scam that he was pulling across the state for the last 7 years.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I have the same questions because I can take it either way. I never really understand, not that whole thing actually was obviously not something that was from real life, but I did study the history of this area, and Venice was very much, that is true, that these were all houses for oil workers, and they were all black oil workers, and they were just kicked out.
So that is totally real. So are you actually now living in one of those houses that the black oil workers?
Guilty. 1924, I looked at on all this area. They're very small. They're 900 square feet, and yeah, because they needed the oil workers nearby, and this was the only place. It's very funny to look at the pictures back from 1924 with this beautiful Venice beach with all these oil rigs all over them and people sunbathing between the oil rigs.
Wow.
But I don't know. I because I feel like right now the ending to me is the calamity of everything coming together. It's focused on that these clashing worlds are living next door to each other, and what I really want to focus on is it's about to explode, because that's the way it feels like in LA sometimes. People are really getting angry. But the minute I either tip my hat and make them legitimately being kind of that his great-grandfather did live here, or that they're scammers, it's sort of, to me at least, I don't know. I don't know. I know how you feel. I don't know if everyone feels that way, and I'm curious because that's a big question in my mind.
Okay, just a quick thing. If you do the math, it could actually have been the grandfather, right? And that would actually pull it one generation closer and possibly motivate that, give them a little bit stronger motivation to claim this territory. By the way, that speech of Amos's after he comes in, I think is quite brilliant. You know, basically that's the speech your neighbor gave you, right? And that is a brilliant speech about entitlement and so on. Paul, did you want to jump in on whether or not the motivation? Do we need to know they're scammers?
I wonder. I kind of like opening the question a little bit, but they feel as I guess there was a little bit more information I wanted to get out of them. I suppose I did want, right now it feels very foolhardy what they're doing. Just with the present, not the present situation, but the sort of overall situation in the world, specifically in the United States, with the castle doctrine and the stand your ground. Like I feel it's so dangerous to go into someone's house and say I'm taking it over. So the ending in a way didn't really surprise me. Unfortunately, I assumed that is what would happen in real life if somebody tried to pull that in the U.S. in this day and age. It would just end in something horrifically violent, which is disturbing. Maybe I should be disturbed by that, but it made Amos and Gladys seem a little bit naive in there. If this is a scheme, then they didn't play it out very well, and yeah.
I think in the back of my mind,
Yeah, I just wanted to go through that very quickly. Dawn, what do you feel about that? Do you need to know whether they're scammers or not?
Personally, yes, I do. For me, sometimes I find that it's really important in terms of how it's going to be perceived, not just by a general audience, but by a Black audience. Because our experience is a lot different, right? Our perceptions are a lot different. And so consequently, if there's a little bit of something there that's going to lead us into a specific direction in terms of who the character is and what that character's motivation is, the more we can accept that person and perhaps be able to deal a little bit better with the ending, you know? Another little thing that was kind of unclear to me, and I'm not quite sure what your take on it is, Oren, but I was a little bit unsure, and perhaps it's just because I just read it like, 2 hours ago. I was unsure as to how Amos knew to go to that particular home and accuse Sid of vandalizing his bike, which started the whole thing. So I don't know. Did he see him
Well, I think
performing the vandalism?
Well, I think they had the battle of the stereos in the middle of the night, and then the bike is parked right outside. So he assumed, because they're the only ones on the block that were sort of fighting with them through the music, right? And he just sort of assumed that because
he assumed it, and then Sid actually admitted it, right? He said it before.
Oh yeah, he admitted it later on.
That's right.
He did admit it later on, but I'm just saying initially it was just based on an assumption.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
the assumption that they were kind of, he saw, they might have seen somebody come out the door. There was something going on the night before. There was a lot of activity that they might have seen her. But I do want to say that if it is a scam, I don't see it as a scam that they're pulling up. That's just Carrie's idea of that. I see it that if they actually are, if it's not really their house, it's something that came out of the moment for that specific, as almost like a revenge for his bike,
Okay.
Okay. Michaela, how do you feel? Have you got any questions for Oren?
On this same thread about whether or not they're scammers,
Yeah, or
whether I need to know the answers to these questions.
you can change the thread if you feel like.
I was going to say, I don't know if I'm terribly traditional, but I do kind of enjoy some answers, but yeah, I don't know. I could be left guessing. I think that what comes across really strongly to me is that this claim to the house, or whether it's a vendetta or what it's highly symbolic. I get that from Amos's speech, so I never really bothered myself on one reading with the legality or what those details don't seem important to me, because it seems like a symbolic quest on his part. And I think what you were saying about people in your neighborhood being very liberal, I'd want to, I think, more of that, the sort of they're taking the piss out of white liberals. I feel like that's there and can be magnified to further comic effect. So I really enjoyed that. I don't know, and then I can start on my Carrie thing if we want to go.
Yeah, yes, please.
Yeah.
So I find her fascinating, and I really, talking about likability of characters, I really dislike Sid. incredible. Like I just find him ineffectual, irritating. I can't, like I don't know, find myself wondering what Carrie sees in him and what the hope is that she'll have that he'll actually take any action, because it becomes apparent very quickly that he's kind of a stick in the mud. I don't know, maybe I'm being mean. Carrie, on the other hand, I'm just very curious about her. She mentions her job at a pharmaceutical company, and then I think that that's going to come back later, but it doesn't really. And I'm wondering if she's supporting him. I have all these questions. Yeah, I think I just want to know more about.
That's a good one. Is she supporting Sid, Oren?
I don't know if it's supporting. They're both kind of struggling along, but it makes a point if she was working full time. I made it pharmaceutical because I mean, that's a kind of, maybe it's not a good enough reason for it, because I wanted her to recognize when she brings back the prescription later on out of the refrigerator for Gladys, that she recognizes and knows exactly what it's for. So,
well, I also like it because it ties into my one umbrella comment too, which is the pandemic framework for this. And so, you know, I kind of clicked into her working for a pharmaceutical company, and then we were talking about being sort of in this world that is post-pandemic. And so I got a little bit curious about how that was going to tie in. And then my general comment about that is just, sometimes I'm unclear of the timeline of how far we are out of the pandemic and how much of a threat it still is. And sometimes I feel like people's behaviors are being affected by this, whether it's a residual sort of thing that they're haunted by, or whether it's still looming. It seems to come and go in terms of how seriously people take it. And absolutely, like having strangers walk into your house, I just want to know how far out we are. You know, are we still at the stage where even, you know, that is inviting someone to sleep in your bed after this pandemic? I can't even imagine it.
Right. Well, I think it's probably, it says 3 months in the script, but obviously I wanted to write the present tense, which when you get a play up on production could be a year from now. So
I would like Michaela, though. I found myself confused as to the timeline in relationship to the pandemic. That's for sure. I'm going to throw another question out to everybody here. Did they believe the moment when Sid asks Amos to come in? Was there enough motivation before that moment to actually warrant Sid inviting Amos into the home? Elaine, I think this was maybe one of your questions too.
Well, I found it believable that he would invite him in because he felt guilty. He was inviting him for a drink or something to eat. Where I had a little bit more trouble was in believing that he'd offer Amos and Gladys his bed. And I know that, you know, this is the character, this is something he might do. It's not something that I personally would feel comfortable doing. And I also had that comment about the pandemic and how far we were out of it, because if Gladys had a cough, how likely is it that Sid would have allowed her in his house, you know, with a pregnant wife and her concern about the virus?
Yeah.
I sort of agree with Elaine a little bit here that I didn't kind of, you know, buy it there. That there wasn't enough guilt in Sid at that point when he invites him in. So I don't know. The other thing I'm going to just throw in here very quickly, the way you described Los Angeles, Oren, at the beginning as to be practically in a war zone, that I think for us lucky people in Montreal, you might have to expound on that a little bit to let us in on that. We don't get that sense of it being, you know, it's at this point, it's just one RV parked against a fence. I don't get a sense of it being part of a huge, you know, issue that's going down in Los Angeles at the moment, right? Speech.
Yeah, I do want to set this in the future when it's produced, and I don't want to have it focus on the pandemic now, because that's, while I was writing it now, I started it before, but while I was writing it now, it either would have taken a completely different turn if I incorporated it to be pandemic play, but then I thought that's going to eclipse what my focus is on. And I sort of, put 3 months, but I do envision this is like a year after, but who knows when this is going to end. So, you don't know, but I'll adjust then.
Anybody got any more questions for Oren at this point? Yes.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Don.
Okay. Yeah, something that I found actually very interesting and quite amusing was the fact that Amos wanted to pay by check for everything, which I thought was really, really cute. Only thing is that I'm not quite sure whether or not those checks would be valid or whether it was just symbolic. That wasn't clear to me, because it could actually go either way.
Yeah, I think if we think that he wanted to pay for it, I see it that they had to be legitimate. That's, and I told you about the story next door, that sometimes you don't have to write a contract, but if you write a check to somebody and you wrote rent and they deposit it and it's a legitimate, it's a legitimate contract, so which is why he was able to say, I'm staying in this house. So
yeah, I understand that. I think initially though, how would Sid really think about accepting a check from someone? First off, this is prior to his knowledge of cashing the check.
Yeah, I don't think he really cared about the money because it was so, he just took it because he didn't want to, it was about pride. He saw it was about pride for Amos, so he just accepted it because there was no arguing with it. And I think when he went to do his errands, when he went to pick up the medicine and fix the bike, he just said, oh, well, I'll deposit this check. And he deposited it because that's when he had deposited it in the bank machine. So
I just found it a little strange because I thought that anybody who would allow someone to come into their home and offer him as much as Sid did offer, it would have been just as easy for him to rip up the check. Do you know what I mean? I just had a little bit of difficulty seeing him go in to cash a check for $2.50.
I'm gonna for once actually stand up for the right on this, because I actually, when I read it, I believed that he took it because he didn't want to offend. That was more the reason. And yeah, it's sort of stretching it a little bit that he would actually deposit it, but why not? He goes by the bank machine. He just pops it in, just do it. So I wasn't that bothered by it. I don't know if anybody else felt that the check issue was kind of pushing believability a little.
I felt it was amusing that Sid deposited it and spoke a lot to the superficialness of his character. Like, who the hell is going to deposit it? And he knows who he's taking the check from. Like I just thought it showed what a sort of inconsiderate jerk he really was, which in a way was darkly comedic. But I don't know if there's any mining you can do to get more of that comedy out of the fact that, but I did buy that he would accept the check because you saw that it was a matter of pride for Amos to give him something, so he accepted it. But he's not going to rip it up in front of him, because then that would add to the insult of your money's not worth it to me.
I didn't think he would rip it up in front of him, but I thought that he would probably just take it and stick it in his pocket and leave it there.
Well, yeah, that's what I thought too. And then we find out that he cashed it. I wouldn't have cashed it personally, but to find out that this dickhead cashed it, I sort of thought, okay, well, now we're getting another little insight into this man's character.
Exactly.
I do have a question. A lot of comments. I mean, coming back, people seem really not to like Sid very much. I never that. I wanted him to be a bit of a weasel, a bit of a weak guy, and it's sort of a reversal where it seems like his wife Carrie wears the shorts, which is sort of based on a a friend of mine whose name is Carrie and Sid. But the question I had was, because they, you know, she's 8 months pregnant. Do you see any love between them? Do you need to? Like, because I feel like this is probably the way they behave to each other, and she sort of cuts him down is coming out of that urgency of wanting to have a man to protect her, and she's about to have a baby. But do you need to see any loving moments between them?
Vishesh, do you want to grab that?
I don't know if I needed to see any. I don't know if I needed to see any more loving moments between Sid and Carrie. I was actually much more curious. I hope you don't mind if I sort of take it in a different direction, but I was actually much more curious about Amos and Gladys. And my question to you, Oren, is how much do you want the audience to know about their inner life based on their interactions with each other? Because they don't get a lot of moments that are of just them together, where neither Sid nor Carrie are kind of with them, and they're putting up this sort of front. And I'll give you an example. There was one line in particular that confused me just a little bit, when Amos says to Gladys, like, I don't remember your family coming to the rescue when this happened. Then he cuts himself off because you say in the stage directions he doesn't want Sid to know. And I guess I was wondering what he was about to say there, and why he doesn't want Sid to know that.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, how much more do we want to know about the relationship? What I've tried to do is give hints without going. So we have hints that they have children, they're not married, there's problems maybe that they don't have their families, you know, because obviously they're living in it. And when I say the RVs here, they're really not beautiful RVs. They're like 30-year-old RVs that are taped together. They wouldn't pass any kind of inspection. There's no bathrooms. So the fact that they're living there, there's got to be a history. And I guess I really want to know how much more you guys want to know about them, or is it enough just to give hints of, well, you know, there's problems here. They obviously had problems with the family because they don't respect them, but am I going to get into it, or I cut it off because I wanted to sort of just drift that there's problems, and that's a moment where they let it out fighting in front of them, and then they quickly, because they have to protect themselves as well. So I to me, that's a big question for me. How much more do you want to know about them?
And again, I'll just give you some generalized feedback from the comments. Yes, people are asking an awful lot about that couple, and who are they? Do they really believe they have some kind of eminent domain on the property? Can they in fact expropriate it morally because of the past of the grandfather? There are a lot of questions about that relationship, you know, and because you paint them a bit as scammers, it undervalues the potential drive to actually move in, you know?
So do you all feel that if you felt that at the end of the play that they were legitimately setting up and this was really the grandfather's house, would that be a positive on this play?
Anybody want to grab that? I certainly, but then I'm an old lefty, so yeah, I'll say yes. Yeah. On that one. I would like that to be a true story about the grandfather.
Right.
I would too.
I think that draft should be written, you know, like just actually write it that way, and you might have a successful play, a more successful play out of it.
It'll definitely be more produced.
Oren, accusing us all here of political correctness. Okay. The title, you asked about the title. What do people feel about the title? Does it work? Is it a little too highbrow? Somebody chimed in that it actually it brings it home to us in Canada because dominion, it kind of it has echoes for a Canadian audience in a sense, and I actually that was a resonance that had happened to me, you know. So it had a resonance about all the wonderful treaties we've signed and so on. But that was a very distant echo, but it still brought that home. Eminent domain, does that work for the play?
Because the eminent domain is a kind of a play on that, because eminent domain is with the E, with the government being able to seize property. Imminent is...
Well, what we call in Canada expropriation is eminent domain, the legal term in the States, right?
Yes, but imminent, I don't even know if it really makes sense, because imminent means the idea that it's about to happen, and domain, so it's not really a term. It's a sort of a play on the term eminent. It's not a spelling mistake as much as I'm putting a twist on it, because I feel like imminent, there's something imminent out there that's about to happen. But I mean, my working title when I started was very simple. It was just, you know, our house or home. It was very simple. And I don't know if like the simpleness of like just home or house or whatever might be, you know, that was what I was grappling with.
Well, for me, the title didn't really mean very much to me until I read the play. So the title could have been about anything, and I'm aware of the eminent domain legal term, but and saw that it was a play on words, but it really wasn't until I finished the play and went back and looked at the title and thought, oh yes, I like that title for this play. So,
okay.
But to me, that's a sign of a good title. So.
Anybody else got a couple more questions for Oren? Motivation, structure, story, clarity? Anybody? Don, if you were to be offered the part of Amos, let's say, what hard questions would you ask the writer about the character and in terms of from an actor's point of view?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. Again, I think I would need to read the play one more time to be able to justifiably come out with a legitimate question in terms of that character. I would like to see him just a little bit more in depth, because there are times where I sort of find him just a little flighty, in my estimation.
Yeah.
I would like to know, I feel as though that there's more of an underlying issue, which obviously there is when you read the full play, but initially when he goes in to confront Sid, what really made him go there? I understand that his bike was vandalized. He may or may not have seen Sid go in there and do something. I think I'm just looking for a little bit of clarity in just certain small areas which would give me the motivation for the character to progress a bit further. And what else?
Okay, I did have Oren. Sorry, Don, I'm not. I don't want to interrupt you. If you had more to go on that, come in at any time. There was one comment that came in that basically asked the question: do you believe this is a real world, a real situation? Is this? Are we actually to believe this is a credible situation? And
yeah.
if it came from another playwright who I guess is trying to suggest that maybe it isn't. Does that bother you?
I would think that it's a definite possibility as a real situation. I've known personally some people that would have no problem whatsoever going into this realm and trying either to scam, one of two directions here. Either trying to scam, we all know scam artists, but then there's also those people that sort of feel that they're entitled. They're entitled because of going back centuries to slavery and the way they were treated and the things that they were promised upon the freeing of the slaves. So yeah, I think that's an important aspect to look into.
Okay, interesting. Oren, do you have anything on that?
No, I think, well, as I said, because it's sort of two elements that I felt that it was happening, that obviously I felt that this could happen. Obviously in theater, you sort of maybe take it a step further a little bit. I don't know, but I think it can. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that, Don. Does anybody other than me see, maybe the first scene or the first two scenes with the laugh track, which you actually stylistically play it up like a bit of a TV sitcom? Does the writer want to shoot me now?
Oh no, I was actually looking at that today, and I did feel like I have to sacrifice a couple of jokes. I mean, what I mean by that is there's like, for instance, Carrie says, she looks at her stomach and she goes, "Thank God your father's not going to be another failed writer." And he says, "That's what you think of me." So maybe get a laugh on that. But I did think like, all right, maybe that's not the right, it's too much. There needs to be a leveling a little bit. You know, I've gone to plays where you do laugh and the laughter draws you in, and then this kind of suddenly things start to happen, but it has to be very gradual, and it can't be too laugh track at the beginning and then not at the end. So there's a lot of ironing that needs to still be done in this play, because as I said, the second act was really written quickly. I don't know if it goes too fast, if I have more luxury to flush things out, because I sometimes feel like, oh, the audience is getting bored here by this certain time, and especially by the second act, you need to push things faster so that you get to the momentum needs to pick up, but maybe I'm going too fast.
Right. Okay. I personally don't think it has to be a perfect play in that sense, stylistically coherent. I don't see why you couldn't, switch styles halfway through, play up the comedy and actually have a real laugh track, in the theater, and then slowly shift until it gets serious. Anyway, that's just a craziness. There have also been a couple of suggestions that maybe on the first birth, it doesn't happen that quickly, that just biologically speaking, that might be an issue, and a midwife may not actually go between the birthing mother's legs with a pair of scissors and little things like that.
100%. That was written very quickly. I did it from my references from watching other television or movie examples, but I really have to go in and research the specifics, what she would need, what she would call for, how it would happen. Because that's one of the examples where I just went, I got to get to the end.
Okay, fair enough. That's why we write plays now. And once again, a reminder that this is all for you. Do you have any other questions you want to throw at us at the end here?
I think we've covered quite a bit. Yeah, I think we've covered everything that I wanted to on my list. I think I brought it up before in terms of, well, it kind of plays into the same thing about whether they were recovering addicts or something. Would that just kill it it doesn't bring anything, I don't think, but does anyone think that that's like a surprise that they want, that adds to it?
I personally, that was probably the only thing that I really didn't like.
Okay.
In the play. I didn't feel that there needed to be a drug addict in there.
Okay.
If that would have been right from the beginning, and that was the focus, then I'd say, okay, fine. But to bring that in and say that she was a drug addict, I didn't think it was necessary.
Okay.
Thanks, Don. Anybody else? A last word? Michaela, since you have said you are a little reluctant to talk. Maybe I can encourage you to have a last word.
I just said that I need to be called on.
I am
I'm a good student. I don't want to have the last word, but I just, when we were talking about the verisimilitude of this situation, I wanted to say that I buy into it also because what I'm seeing right now kind of around COVID and the horrible situation a lot of people find themselves in is a rising tide of hatred toward landowners. Like it's becoming this very politicized thing, and with rent strikes and people taking on really extreme language that like all landlords should be massacred. So I think, you know, these groups exist. And so I think a little bit of that, like I totally buy that this would be happening in a not too distant future.
Okay. Vishesh, have you got any last thoughts for Oren? Remembering this is an exercise for Oren. We're trying to help him move on to the next draft with wisdom and gentleness.
Not much more than to reiterate what I already said about my curiosity about the characters and my wanting to know more about them. I think that's yeah.
Okay, thank you. Elaine?
Yeah, I agree. I think we've covered pretty much all of our comments. The only thing I would add is the story doesn't say very much of like anything in a positive light about the police, because they were always reluctant to go to the police when they had to deal with these situations. And I think that is a sad statement for our society right now.
And I'm presuming quite real in LA, is that right, Oren?
I don't think it's the police's fault. It's just a question of so many cuts, and the police just have many other things to do. The city is cut their budget so much, and I don't know if do you feel like it reflects negatively on the police itself, or it's more a question of, you know, the city?
I would say the city.
Okay, good. That's what I want.
Yeah.
You cannot get policemen out here. No.
Paul?
Yeah, I had one.
Sorry.
Just an addition.
Sorry,
to
did
that.
you have something? I cut you off there. I didn't want to do that. Did you have one last, sorry, something you wanted to say, Elaine?
No, that was it.
Okay, sorry, Paul.
I wanted to carry on just the question of the police. It's a rather specific note, but on page 53, Sid's very quick to mention, this is my house and you need to leave right now or I'm going to call the police. And this comes 4 lines after Amos says, or is it Gladys who says, we're staying. It's the big sort of switch in the play, and he brings up the police very quickly, which seemed, just from my logical point of view, like the police are sort of the last resort. Like I feel as if he's bringing up the police a little too early in the argument. I want to hear him try and graciously get Amos out of the house, and then, because ultimately I don't know, like, again, why didn't they call the police if they really needed to remove these people? But it seemed a very quick reaction, which canceled a lot of the other dialogue that could come before such a drastic resort.
Okay.
I just wanted to say really quickly on the subject of the police that I did think there was a statement about police being made and not necessarily the city, because early on, Sid and Carrie say that if at the beginning of the play, when we're still in the sitcom, they say if we call the police, they're going to kill us both, which I thought was like, what a statement, right, from 2 white characters. And I was expecting that to be picked up with Amos and his wife later on. So anyways, just to say, I thought there is a conversation about the police going on that renders them quite sinister. So, and I don't disagree, but yeah.
I just think anytime there's like a policeman called to a scene and somebody says that there's a gun involved, that there's the danger, that there's mistakes and there's a shootout, not necessarily that they're violent or, you know, I like my police here. I do like policemen.
Dawn, did you want to have any last thoughts?
I think I'm good.
And the combination of comedy and seriousness can work for us. I believe it does. I don't know whether it works for everybody else, but that's what I think Oren is after, is to start us off with comedy and finish us off with something surprising and violent, and how we lose ourselves as human beings when we are trying, when we irrationally try and protect our domain and our family and so on. Anyway, so we have been here with Oren Safdie, talking about the first draft of his new play, Imminent Domain. Thank you very much, Oren. This was for you. I hope that some of it was of use. And thank you very much for joining us in the chat room, everybody. And a reminder to everybody else who's listening, same time next week. And we will be with Alexandria Haber and Ned Cox and discussing their play. So join us again then. And thank you very much for being with us. And thank you all in the various parts of the country for joining us. All the best.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. And thanks for everyone who wrote in the comments too.
Yes, yes.
Okay.